Welcome everybody to our Behind the Fluff Inspiring the Next CMO podcast series. We have got some fantastic resources to inspire you at www.internationalbrunch.com/be inspired. Now today, I would like to welcome Juliet Harrison. Juliet is an industry senior publishing lead and someone that I really admire and work closely with as part of our voluntary work with the ALPS Membership and Marketing Committee. Hello, Juliet.
Hi, Lou. Lovely to see you.
Lovely to have you here. Now, before we get started, I have one question for you. Something we ask everyone before we start is that we have a campaign called #IntBunch Word of the Day, and we would love to know, what is your favourite word and why?
So I don't know what this necessarily says about me, but my favourite word is a German word that you may have heard called schadenfreude. No. And the meaning is pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune. The reason I like it is because it's such a human emotion to feel that. And I think particularly with the on sort of social media and the fact that people are always posting things to make other people feel bad, you know, it's a real raw human emotion to take pleasure out of other people when other people are doing so well. And I just love the fact that there has been a word invented for it. So whilst it's not from the English language, I'm going to take ownership of it as something that we all secretly enjoy.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, I do love a bit of car crash TV. So that kind of stuff, yeah, definitely resonates with me. Oh, I'm really looking forward to this interview now.
Oh no, sounds terrible to say.
Set the scene now. Okay, so first things first, we really want to know a bit more about you. So what's the best thing that you have discovered in this last funny old pandemic year, even longer than a year now, that we've been in?
I think the main thing, and this is probably true of a lot of people with young children, is that I can work really effectively in very, very short bursts. So I have, just for a bit of background, I have 4 and now 7-year-old boys. So during the peak of the pandemic, they were 3 and 5. So it was a very, very challenging time, but it showed me that actually I can be very, very focused and get a huge amount of work done in a very, very short amount of time. And I think probably what a lot of businesses have also now started to realise is that this standard working week from 9 till 5 is not necessarily making the most productive use of people's time, and people actually work better in different ways. So I hope that as a result of that, you know, when I go back to the office, that there'll remain that element of flexibility, that it seems to be looking that way. But I don't think actually working big chunks of time is the most productive way that we can be. And actually, I think sitting down and doing a bit, then taking a break is a much more effective way of working, and actually gives you the focus that you need.
Yeah, absolutely. And taking breaks is so important. And it's too easy for us to sit here and then a few hours later go, oh, I haven't even got up to get myself a drink, or I haven't just, you know, got up to do anything, get some exercise. And I think a lot of people have suffered with that over the past year, just that working so much. And, you know, we've worked from home or remotely here at the International Brunch all of the time for the business. And I've been working remotely since 2012. And it's just too easy to get stuck and you also tend to work more time because you're not commuting. So you're working more time somehow. So, yeah. It's really, really important, our health and especially our mental health over this past year.
Yeah, and actually, I think, I mean, it's useful that you can be flexible with your hours, and I think that's something that will continue to be how people work. But then the boundaries of work and life can get blurred, can't they? And you don't ever really switch off. And so we actually recently got a puppy, which I never ever thought I would do, but actually the physical having to go out and take a dog for a walk has been really, really beneficial, because it forces you into that different headspace, and you always come back feeling more positive.
What puppy did you get?
We got a little black Labrador called Mo. So not so little now, he's a giant now, but but it definitely helps with kind of getting that headspace that you need, that otherwise you wouldn't necessarily give yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Pets are wonderful things, aren't they? There are several people I know that have acquired themselves pets when actually they have a really very busy professional life and used to travel a lot. But now it's that readjusting and saying, maybe I don't need to do this, or maybe I need to work out my balance, as they say, of my work and home life. But as long as you can shut that computer down and walk away from it and actually have some time, that's hard to do.
And it actually makes you more effective, I think, in the long run. I think the longer you work without a break, the less productive you are.
Yeah.
Although the quality of the work gets worse.
No, I think absolutely right. Absolutely right. So who inspires you?
Well, there's kind of an ongoing theme here, but I think probably at the moment it's people, and particularly mums, who have had to work and look after children during lockdown. So, I count myself within that group, but I'm also aware that I have a husband that works part-time and is a huge help in terms of childcare. So I've had a lot of benefit as a result of that. But, looking at the research, the amount of redundancies and the dropout level of work from women over the past 18 months has been much more proportionally higher than that of men. So it's a really, really big problem. And I think a lot of companies over the past few years have been looking at the gender pay gap as a really important thing. But actually, we've taken a huge step back. And this is in the developed world. If you think about the developing world, there's much, much bigger problems there. I think the other issue is that women, in my experience, tend to take on the mental load of things and not necessarily, they try and absorb without necessarily realizing that it's not good for them. And so then you end up either getting ill or just suffering in silence. So I think, we're coming out the end of it, and I think it has been useful in a lot of ways. It means you get to spend more time with your family, but it's not, parents shouldn't, my view is that parents shouldn't be teaching their own children. The dynamic is all wrong and it just doesn't work. So I'm really, really in awe of particularly parents and single parents that have had to do it over this period and haven't had any kind of support layer.
The resilience is incredible, and I think we've all learnt a lot from each other. I have to say that first 4 months in the UK, when all the different nations in the UK went into that lockdown, I think that was probably one of, if not the most toughest mentally time of my life. I mean, I say to people, it nearly broke me, but I think if I was completely honest, it probably did break me. But it's amazing how we just keep going. If we can, we just keep going and we prioritize things, and then we just deal with things later, because we know that our children still need to be fed. Our partners still need to be happy, just keep them at that level so that you're just not tipping yourself over the edge. Absolutely, completely appreciate that, and completely agree with that as well. So when you were young, I always, when I say this question, I think of I instantly put someone in some kind of little outfit, like a little Superman outfit or Wonder Woman or whatever. Or a little vet's outfit, but when you were young, what did you want to be?
I always wanted to work in the theatre, actually. I did a theatre studies A-level, and I was really into performing arts and singing as a child, and that was always the route I always thought I would go down. So I went to university and I did an English degree and then a film studies master's, which are, I guess, related to a point, but for whatever reason it didn't come off. Probably I wasn't talented enough, but also I probably wasn't brave enough to pursue it. But whenever I go to the theatre now, I still get a pang to think, wouldn't it be wonderful to be the people on that stage? So that's if I wasn't doing academic publishing in an ideal world, that's what I would have loved to have been doing.
But you still can, when your children get a bit older and you get that bit more time, time's a wonderful thing if we ever get it back. So when you get that bit of extra time, you could start being, join your local theatre club.
Yeah, well, that's the plan, actually. There's lots of amateur dramatic that goes on where I live in Ilkley. So I am planning to sign up in the next couple of years. So watch this space. There might be coming to the local theatre near you.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, come to Swansea. That'd be brilliant. When they all open up again normally, oh God, I just can't wait. And I think that probably cinemas, libraries, theatres are going to see a real revival, because we all really appreciate what we've lost and what we've not had for so long. So hopefully there's going to be some amazing things coming out.
I think so. Since lockdown eased, actually, I've already been to the cinema twice. So I absolutely love it.
I'm not even sure in Wales if they're open or not.
Well, it's a posh cinema where you can get a bottle of wine. So even more reason to go.
I love it. Our daughter's 3, so trying to get her to watch a film for a concentrated amount of time is quite hard. We took her for we did one where we took our van and we did like a, you know how they do in the US, those big screens, and you sit
a drive-through. Yeah,
so we did like a drive-through one, and it was brilliant. You know, everything was brought to the van, and you could order on your phone, and it was so easy, it was so good. And we watched Shrek, and it was brilliant. But she did get a bit bored partway through, and tablet had to come out, and you know, we had to have lots of conversations. So yeah,
it's about 45 minutes. That's their cut-off point, isn't it? Before you lose them.
if you're lucky. So if you were to have dinner tonight with anybody in the world, alive or dead, who would it be?
So first of all, my mum died a few years ago. She died in 2013 of breast cancer. So I was about 30, and it was obviously a really challenging time. And it was just before I had my first child, so she never got to meet my children. So partly I would invite my mum so I could see her again and I could introduce her to my lovely boys. But in terms of famous people, I am obsessed with Stevie Wonder.
Oh, really?
Yeah, as a child, my dad always had the Innovision soundtrack and always played it in the car on car journeys, and so we all listened to it. And I actually got to go and see him at Hyde Park in 2019, supported by Lionel Richie. So possibly the best day of my life. So I'd love to actually meet him and have a conversation with him. So he'd be on the list. And actually, for my first wedding anniversary, which I think is paper, my husband got me a poster of Stevie Wonder and Lionel Richie at the Grammys together, which I have framed in the upstairs hall. So that's the level of obsession that I have. And in addition to that, I think probably Louis Theroux, just because he's so interesting, and he's been taken to the nation's heart, hasn't he? And just the amount of interesting experience that he's had. I've also listened to some of his podcasts that he's done recently through his series. He did one with John Ronson, which I thought was fantastic. So probably that would be a small but perfectly formed lineup.
That would be quite a dinner, wouldn't it?
Quite the dinner.
What would your mum think of being sat with, you know, Stevie Wonder and all these other guys?
Oh, she'd have a great time. I mean, I might even add Stephen Fry to the mix just for a bit of culture as well. So yeah, we'd have great music as well, wouldn't we? So.
Yeah. Excellent. Now that would be quite a table. I want to join that table.
Absolutely, you're invited.
And I can't believe that Lionel Richie was supporting Stevie Wonder.
I know. I wonder how Lionel Richie felt about that, but I think that's the right order, isn't it?
Well, he did it. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about your career. Now, tell me about your career and how you got to where you are today.
So I came to publishing, I guess, relatively late in terms of a lot of people come out of university. So I joined Emerald when I was in, I think, when was it, 2008? I was 25. So I'd travelled the world before that and done kind of bits and bobs. But so I started at the entry level job. I was an assistant publisher and I worked my way up. I became a publisher. On journals, I was a commissioning editor for about 5 minutes on books, and then we restructured and I went back to being a publisher. And then the head of publishing took a punt on me and promoted me to an executive publisher. So I was managing quite a big team. Initially, it was the social sciences team, and then it was the business management and economics team. And that was a team of publishers working globally. So I had a team out of Boston in the US. In a variety of subjects and on a variety of content forms, so books, journals and cases. I knew what I was doing with journals. I was confident in how the journals process managed on with books to a degree, but I'd not really dug my toe into the teaching and learning space. And also the cases role gives me an ability to dip my toe into the product management aspect of the role as well. So I felt it was quite an interesting move. Yeah. But I feel like I've had progression the whole time within that. So I don't feel that I've been static. You know, I've tried a lot of different things and I've developed a lot of different skill sets. I'm also on a number of different committees. So as you said, I'm on the Arts Membership Committee. And up until recently, I was on the STM Early Careers Publishers Committee, which I decided I could no longer consider myself early career. So I stepped down from that. but that's helped me to develop my networks beyond the organisation that I work at. So I think for that reason, I'm still quite varied in terms of the relationships that I have.
But, you know, I think, yeah, there are pros and cons to being an organisation for a length of time. And of course, if you work at different organisations, you're going to have different experiences. But I'm sure if you met that 25-year-old self back then now and looked at the organisation that you joined then, it's probably completely different to what you have now. And what you're doing. So you've grown with an organisation that in turn itself has also grown. And you've moved between departments, which I think is also really important. And you work with so many different people. And we as individuals are so unique. No one can replicate the experiences that you as an individual have had. Even if I'm in the same conversation with someone, with you, we're both experiencing something different. So we're all incredibly unique like that. So I wouldn't see that as a downfall. And at the end of the day, it's about the people, and it's about the people that you have that join you in organizations. So I think, you know, credit to you for managing to stay in an organization through restructures. I think that's a great thing.
Oh yeah, potentially. And you know, it's always been pretty positive. And actually 2 years of that, I was out on maternity leave. So there's that element of taking time out and then having to get back up to speed. That's always a challenge as well. But actually,
so what have you been most proud of in your career?
I think it's to do with the relationships that I've made, actually. So I've talked about some of the committees that I've been on, and particularly the Early Career Publishers Committee. I'm still in contact with all of those, the people that were on the committee when I was on them. And actually, you know, people underestimate the value of the relationships and the friendships that you make when you are in the workplace. You know, you spend a huge proportion of your time at work, and actually those friendships can become really, really valuable to you. And they're your allies for a period of time. So they remain really important to me. So there's people that I used to work with that I went to the cinema with on Monday, actually. And I think the other thing is that you also don't necessarily realise the value of those relationships professionally until further down the line when you need to call on them. So I think that's incredibly important. And then I'm also really proud of the progression that I've made. When I joined publishing, I didn't have a publishing degree. I was completely new to it, and within a relatively short space of time, I was kind of promoted and got to a relatively senior point, and was managing people with a lot more experience than I have. So I think that's potentially down to the soft skills that I have. I feel that I'm a good manager and that I understand and can support people in the way that they need to be supported. And I think it's helped that I've managed people from different cultural backgrounds and different parts of the world, because it requires a different approach. So those soft skills, I think, have served me quite well. And when you're new to a role, that's a really important part of embedding yourself within a team and getting people to like you, you know, which is professionally is quite important. And I think that's something that I'm quite good at. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's like when we look at when we work together on the Outs Membership and Marketing Committee, you know, your experience and expertise is so incredibly valuable to us. Don't you go anywhere. But it's great to have such a mixed and blend of different experience coming together. So so thinking about what you've been most proud of, then what have you found most challenging?
So we've talked a little bit about the past 18 months and how difficult those have been. You know, there was also, as you'll probably know from having worked in the publishing industry, there's restructures happen quite consistently, and there was quite a big restructure that happened within our division last year, which impacted me. And it meant that I had to make this decision about what role I wanted to take. And I guess professionally it would have been considered a step down, but I took it as an opportunity to say, actually, when I'm thinking about what professionally the next step is for me, there's certain skills and experience that I don't have. I've got a lot of experience about relationship management and stakeholder engagement, and I feel very confident in doing that. Portfolio management is also something that I consistently do, but I don't have some of those more product management type skills, and I'm not so familiar with this part of the teaching and learning space. So I took this role, but also thought, well, what else is it that I need to do to make myself desirable? So I'm now doing a degree in project management, which with the APM. So I think it's a 4-year course, but by sort of the middle of 2022, I'll be qualified. And I just think it means that whilst it may open doors in terms of project management specifically, what I found working in publishing is that most projects that sit within a publishing company touch the publishing department in some way. And there's always a dearth of skills and experience in terms of having someone that can support on the management of those projects. And if you had someone that understands the workings of that division, but also can apply the principles of project management, I think that could become quite a compelling skill set. So I'm hoping that will make me more desirable, and it will open up more opportunities for me in the future, so that I can continue to progress and develop. But it's not been easy. You take these professional hits and it is difficult, and I think it's about what you do next and what you take from that and what opportunities you create.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the project management side is transferable skills to lots of different departments, so I think it's an incredibly important skill set, and it's also a very sustainable way of thinking and about how you can continue to bring value to your organization, because projects will continually need to happen, but you need to make sure that projects get finished. And often projects just get stuck, and it's having that ability and that expertise and that know-how to say, right, we've got this blocker, now we need to remove that and we need to move this forward, even though it may end up in a situation of saying, this is not going to happen, this is not viable. You're making a decision about that project. So yeah, I think that's a really intelligent way of thinking about it. And that's going to be very excited that in only a year's time, you're going to be qualified.
Yeah. So it'll be like a junior project management. So after 4 years, I'll be fully qualified, but enough to be able to start applying it, I think. And some of the feedback I've had is I think that in the past, often companies bring in project managers externally, and because of some of the industries that project managers work within, often they want to very rigidly apply the principles. And actually, within a publishing company in particular, you have to be a bit more flexible about understanding what aspects you need to use and what aspects aren't necessarily going to work within that industry. So I think being able to use both skill sets is going to be incredibly important. But balancing a degree and a full-time job and 2 young kids is proving interesting.
And husband.
And husband,
yeah,
so,
very much so.
I'm in the middle of my second assignment. It's going okay, but it's financial modelling, so it's not my strong suit necessarily.
Yeah, I don't envy you at all. So what is when we talk about this fact that you're doing the project management side and everything else that you've done, and actually now you've moved to a different type of role and you're in a different sphere as well. What is your ultimate career goal?
So it's interesting. I think up until more recently, or maybe up until I had children, I was very ambitious, and I guess I was kind of saying, what's the next step? Where do I need to go? And it was always kind of head of publishing type position. And actually, I think the last 18 months have given me a lot of time to reassess, and actually what I want to ensure that whatever I'm doing, my ultimate career goal is that I'm enjoying it. And I think you start to become more confident in your abilities and understand what you're good at. And I think I want to be able to continue to do what I'm good at. I'm very good at engaging with people and working with people, which is why I like I'm working in publishing, because it's talking to people all the time and learning about different disciplines. But I think actually it's very, very hard to find a job that you enjoy and not get caught up too much in the internal politics and find that you're actually doing all of the stuff that you don't really enjoy and have very little time to focus on what you do enjoy. And I'm always quite inspired by my dad, who's a composer, and for him work is not work, it's just his hobby, and it's doing what he loves. So I think it's continuing to develop myself to make sure that I'm employable and I'm learning all the time, but also saying if I take a role and I'm not enjoying it, maybe it's not applying the skills that I most readily have and I want to be able to use. So it's actually quite a big ask. I don't think anyone enjoys their job all the time, but I think I've been quite lucky in my professional career so far that on the whole, I have enjoyed it. It's an interesting industry to work in, and there's lots of really clever people with lots of interesting ideas. and because it's changing all the time, you know, you don't have the ability to get stuck in a rut because you're having to adapt consistently.
Yeah, it's an ever-changing landscape.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then something else comes in, and that was, you know, low priority, and suddenly becomes a massive priority and changes the whole landscape, like open research, for example.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's open access has always been around in some form or another, you know, for years and years and years and years, but open research is kind of wider adoption of it, the acceleration of it, you know, it's much more prominent. So,
and there's so many opposing views, isn't there, as well? So navigating
Absolutely.
the landscape, and also just staying up to speed with the industry developments is a job in of itself, actually. So finding the time to carve out that time to do that work is really important.
Yeah, it's really hard as well, because there's so much noise out there, and it's trying to find the right channels that you're going to get the right information, and also you're not just going to have someone's opinion, you're actually going to read some authoritative news. And you know, we've had some recent changes in the industry that I think what's been really interesting is when people are quite isolated in terms of the team that they work in, and they don't have enough knowledge or the broader knowledge about what the whole of the ecosystem of academic publishing or scholarly comms is, from the libraries and the service providers between publishers and libraries, and then the publishers themselves and the societies and all the various different stakeholders. It was like the acquisition of ProQuest by Clarivate Analytics. And, you know, when I spoke to some people who were very focused in the publishing sphere, because that's where they spend their time, that when I talked to them about, oh, you know, did you hear about this? And they didn't know so much about ProQuest. They kind of heard of them, but didn't know so much about them. And they were like, oh, millions, surely, not billions. And I'm like, no, billions, you know, it's because they just didn't know how big that these other type of organizations are that are also in the sphere. So it's such a complex and huge industry.
Yeah, and I imagine that a big part of your day-to-day role is just trying to stay up to speed with all of that.
Yeah, it's too hard.
It's too much.
I just bombarded with information all the time, and then loads of marketing information, and you know, this is what's happening in marketing, and I'm like, oh gosh.
And actually, I find Twitter to be a really useful resource for that, to kind of just pull out the people that I follow that I particularly trust in terms of what they're directing me to. That can help to calm the noise down, but also then you get sucked into a Twitter hole, don't you?
You do. But the interesting thing is, because you and I had done some research about this the other day with some colleagues on the committees, and it was talking about where people are discovering industry news. And I think I had said, oh, is there any kind of hashtag that anyone's using? And everyone's like, no, not really. And like you said, it was about following specific people that there's trust in, and in terms of what they're going to be retweeting, what they're going to be talking about. And so I think that that's really important. Actually, trust is incredibly important in the industry, and often something that I think is sidelined. And I hope that now that we've had this eye-opening experience of a pandemic for the past 15, 18 months, however long it's been, that organizations and the industry are going to apply more trust to their colleagues and to the employees that they have. And I can see that's definitely happened. It's been quite eye-opening for many. Well, I think for all of us, to be honest.
Yeah.
In a pandemic before. Well, we haven't, because we went around with a bubonic plague and.
Oh no! And I had an interesting conversation with someone earlier this week from the Arts Committee, actually, we were saying that in the past, if you wanted to do, I guess what we would categorise as deep thinking, you'd work from home, and now we all need to go to one office and do that, because suddenly our home life is just so impinged on everything else. So I think that balance of working from an office and working from home is going to be increasingly important. But I still think the social aspect of work is what we're missing. And I am finding with online conferences, it's having the social that it just doesn't work remotely. And you know, you find out some of the most interesting information at the pub after a conference or during a conference dinner, don't you? And
in the bar.
Yeah, absolutely.
After a few drinks, oh my god, have you heard this?
So
I had to do that. Juliet, I had to do that last week or the week before, I think it was, and I literally said to a couple of people, right, we've got to have a chat. And I said to them, I have no idea. My head's been down, getting on with some white papers and things. I've got no idea what the gossip is. Tell me some gossip. And they're like, oh, let me tell you. And I'm like, this is what I miss from conferences. Where's all the goss?
You just need, and that's how the relationships really develop, isn't it? And actually, even when you're doing things like commissioning remotely is tricky as well, because you can't develop that rapport with people in the same way. So I think everything will have its, there'll be a hybrid approach to a degree, but there's still going to be that need for face-to-face interaction. That will never go away. And I miss going to London as well. So I'm hoping that I'll have the opportunity to start doing that again.
Yeah, me too. Even if we have to go on with masks on, I don't really care.
No.
I literally do that. I just can't wait till we have our first face-to-face conference, whatever that is. I'm there.
Everyone's going to just be so, either really excited or just really, really anxious, and none of us will know how to behave.
Yeah, everyone's just going to go out in the evening. We're all going to get, very drunk because we're not used to alcohol as much as, well, maybe some people are, because a lot of people have drunk more at home.
Yeah.
But we're all just going to get very, very drunk. There's going to be lots of great gossip. And then the next morning, when they have like the startup session, no one will be there because we'll all be very hungover and be thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to get to that first session. So and everyone will stink of alcohol. It'll be coming out their pores. It'll be,
I miss those.
I'll be going, oh, Juliet, did you hear what happened last night?
Exactly. We'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. Oh dear. So, brilliant. So, if you weren't doing the role that you're doing now, and money was absolutely no object, what would you be?
So I mentioned before I started working in publishing, my husband and I travelled, so we love travelling, but something that we continually returned to when we were travelling was the idea of opening a B&B together. I think I would probably be front of house because my husband's not necessarily as much of a people person, shall we say. And he could be doing kind of behind the scenes stuff, but we always
right in the back in the kitchen, not seeing anybody.
Doing the paperwork, making the beds. No, probably not. But we always thought that we would potentially work quite well together as a team. And I know that's something that's really, really hard to get right, and you don't actually make a lot of money, but that was always kind of a pipe dream for us. So maybe in the future. And I think generally probably everyone says this, but just traveling. And, I think what we've felt really sad about over the past 18 months is that we've not been able to take our children abroad. And I think a big part of what shaped us to be the people that we are is that our parents took us abroad a lot as children. And, it challenges you and it puts you in difficult situations, and it helps you to develop. And apparently part of the reason that as an adult time passes so quickly is because you're doing the same things all the time, and actually you don't have many new experiences, and so the passage of time seems to pass more quickly. And so for children, because they're constantly having new experiences, they perceive time to be longer. And so I think that's incredibly important, and I hope that I'll get to a point where I'm retired and I can do more of that. I can travel and just have new experiences, because you get to a point in your life when I think you can get frightened of new experiences, and I think it's always important to be pushing yourself out of that comfort zone. But saying that, I'm not sure if practically I could work with my husband 100% of the time, so maybe that won't happen.
maybe you could buy some lovely property with self-catering, cottages, and he does that, you do the front of house but still working, but you do speaking to people, and then and he can just
I think couples who work together I have a lot of respect for. I'm not sure it's necessarily healthy for your relationship, but I know lots of people do it, so we could give it a go.
It's got to be right for different people, hasn't it? We're all different individuals, and our relationships are also function in different ways. So absolutely.
And lockdown has really tested those relationships actually. And so if we're still together now, we can get through anything.
I said to my husband the other day, because at one point I just wanted him to leave just to have a bit of a break from him. I'm like, could you just go away for a few days? But that was when it was like no one's going anywhere, and it's like, oh my gosh, we just need a break from each other. And he felt the same. So I said to him, you know, if we can get through a pandemic, to be honest, I think we can get through anything. So
Yeah,
I think we'll be all right.
Because you'll know what it's like with young children. You never get any time to yourself, and you need that headspace. You need the silence, and not having that because we're all cooped up together has been really hard.
Really hard. Do you know, we've just got a Peloton, and I got on it last night for my first proper exercise. And in fact, there is an industry group who
Really?
who are on Peloton. Apparently, I haven't sorted that out yet, but I got on it last night, and then my 3-year-old was, I don't know, she, for some reason, she's not dependent on me at all, but she started crying about something, and I was trying to focus on this woman shouting at me on the screen. And I found it really distressing, and I was just like, I just want to be able to do some exercise on my own.
Just stop.
Stop, Dave! Sort Pappy out, can't take it.
Yeah,
oh, dear.
It's just get a dog.
Yeah, I've got 2.
Oh, there you go.
And 2 cats and a snake and 6
Oh,
chickens.
wow.
And some fish. I don't think we need anything else.
No, you're probably good. Don't make it easy for yourself.
Will be like, bye.
Just say, Juliet made me do it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll blame it all on you. So who's Juliet? I'm like, no, well, that's it, you see. So it's funny though, when you talk about new challenges when you're older, actually, that's really interesting, because when we used to be in the car a lot, going to places, whether it was commuting, whatever, you know, when you used to get somewhere, a journey that you might do a lot, and then you suddenly go, oh, how did I get here? You know, because you've been off in your own head. And it's like you say, you know, you're so used to doing it. But I think, and I hope the pandemic has taught people, because it's a bit like when I've faced redundancy and been made redundant twice, is that actually opportunities come up and you shouldn't be shy and you shouldn't be scared, and you realize, well, you know, I can do these things. And so there are opportunities out there. And so when people say to me things like Hannah Baldwin, who's done this Inspiring the Next CMO podcast, she had said, oh, well, I'm seeing I would like to do open up a deli, but you know, that's something that she would love to do, or she'd like to go to south of France, and she'd like to have, you know, look after lots of dogs and things. And a lot of people think, well, because I'm at a certain age, I can't do that. And I say to people, well, you know what? My mother was I think she was in her 40s or early 50s, and she retrained as a solicitor from being an interior designer. And she had to obviously then try and get employment with a solicitor's. And she was up against people who just left university, but she did. And, you know, she became a solicitor, and now she's a retired solicitor, and she did it later on in life. So I think, you know, the world is your oyster, and you can.
Absolutely.
And I hope the pandemic's taught us that as well.
Yeah, and I went to a conference a while back. I can't remember which conference it was, but there was a really brilliant keynote speaker who said, when you think about the passage of life, you know, you see education just at this point at the beginning, and then you have work, and then you retire. And actually, education should be peppered throughout your professional career. You should always take breaks to go back into education. And I think that's actually, it's really important as an adult to continuously be learning. Why should you just stop when you get to 18?
Agree.
So I think that's it's really encouraging that the degree I'm doing is through the government apprenticeship scheme, so that companies, if they can support their staff to do training in the workplace, it's only going to be a benefit to the organisation, actually.
Absolutely agree with that. I was an appalling student. I was never really I was living in Malta, enjoying life very much so, with my mother and my stepfather out of the country a lot, so I was having a ball. But as I got older, and I went to university without A levels, managed to get in, but I really appreciate that sentiment that you said there around education, and I certainly got better with education as I got older. And I've been professionally qualified in other different areas, and I've really enjoyed that. But I think it also took me to have a specific mental attitude to that, and really know the value of it, but also apply your own experiences to some of the things that you're being taught. And I'm dyslexic, and I think that my dyslexia held me back when I was younger. I'm really sorry if you can hear this noise every now and again. One of my chickens has just laid an egg, so she's like, I've laid an egg, I've laid an egg, I've laid an egg. Amazing. So I'm sure that people will hear it in the recording. Yeah, so absolutely agree with that sentiment about education.
And actually, my dad said that it's a story that he always tells, that when I was at university, I came back after the first term and said, "Oh, university's it's been really hard. I've been really busy recently, so I've had to cut my clubbing back to 4 nights a week." So I think I'm probably more applied now than I was at university. So, I think actually you're probably a better student as an adult because you're used to applying yourself for set amounts of time. And actually, when you get to 18 and you go to university, that's not necessarily at the forefront of your mind.
No, it's like when you're at uni and they say to you wait, and you're like, what are you talking about? It's really hard, and then you go into the working world, and then you do education as well as working.
Oh,
and then you're like, oh yeah,
hang on, what was I
those days? Yeah, 4 nights of clubbing. Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Don't do that now. Can't even remember the last time I went clubbing. Mind you, clubs haven't been closed for a long time.
Yeah.
So, now I say this about 3 inspiring books are your must read and why, but you may not read professional books because some of the people that we interview don't. And they prefer to talk about books that they like reading that aren't professional, or even blogs or podcasts that they are into.
So yeah, I'm not actually going to talk about professional books. It's just books that I've read over the course of my life that have had an impact on me.
Yeah.
So the first is a book called The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which I read in my 3rd year of university. And it's about a group of friends who meet at university, so it was very relevant to me at that time. And they're at a university a bit like Oxford or Cambridge, and they're studying Greek mythology. And something terrible happens, an incident happens, and it's about how they react to that. But it was just so significant for me because I remember reading it when we were visiting some friends in Paris during the university holiday. And my partner, now husband, kept saying, "We're in Paris. Can we go and experience Paris?" And I just could not put this book down. And I think it was just it got me at the right time. It was sort of a significant point in my life. So I'd really recommend that. And Donna Tartt is a wonderful writer.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is one I've read more recently. And it's by an author, I hope I'm going to pronounce this correctly, called Hanya Yanagihara. It's called A Little Life. And again, it's about 4 friends who meet in college and are friends then throughout their life. But they all experience trauma, and it's about how they respond to trauma. And I don't know whether that's potentially a theme in terms of the types of books that I'm interested in reading, because the other 2 which are on a theme, there's one called High Sobriety by Alice King. And she was a writer and a wine critic, and it's about her battles with alcoholism. And there's one called A Million Little Pieces by James Frey, and again it's about his recovery from addiction. And I think I find those types of books very interesting because I think we're potentially all on the precipice. Everyone has elements of addiction in their personality, whether it's to alcohol or to food. And I'm always interested in why some people can't get on top of it, and whether it's related to trauma in their life or whether it's just a personality type. And I think society is quite condemning of people with addiction problems in saying it's something that you can control, it's in your gift, it's your responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's always the case. If you think about the number of people from different backgrounds and different ethnic groups who struggle with addiction problems. So I always find it interesting to read about the different experiences that people have had. So I'd really recommend both of those books that are kind of particularly on people's relationship with addiction. And actually, in my own experience, through lockdown, I turn to a glass of wine or a beer if I've had a stressful day, and you can see how it's insidious, and it can start to just become increasingly more and more a part of your life. So I think it's really important for people to understand more about that.
Becomes very habitual.
It does, yeah. And it's just how you deal with stress. And there's a program I used to watch called Fresh Meat, about students at university, and someone said that they didn't drink, and one of them said, "Well, what do you do if you're happy, or if you're sad, or if you're stressed, or if you're angry?" It was just kind of the British reaction to anything. Is to drink, isn't it?
It's like, I think years ago when I used to smoke, it's, if I was stressed, I'd instantly have a cigarette. You do depend on certain things because of what specific emotion that you're feeling at the time, and you do associate that behavior with that emotion. And yeah, addiction's a very, very interesting area. And I think you're absolutely right. It's a bit like mental health as well, in the respect that I think until we had the pandemic, mental health was being talked about, but not as openly as it is now, and also appreciated, because I think so many people have experienced mental health more significantly than they ever have before, or even didn't think that they had experienced it and have now, and realize, oh right, it's like that, amplified by 10. Yeah, can completely understand how you can't snap yourself out of that. So I think that we're much more empathetic now as well. No, those sound like brilliant books.
Yeah, no, they're all great. And I guess the other benefit of lockdown is that probably lots of people who are naturally introverted and didn't really enjoy going into the office have probably actually really welcomed the change. I know my sister is not particularly outgoing, and she's not an extrovert by any means, and so she's having that peace and that kind of comfort area for her has been really important. So there's been a huge benefit for lots of people in terms of the mental health, as well as those who struggled with that thing.
Absolutely right. Some people I've spoken to have said to me, I've loved it.
Yeah.
I haven't had to mix with people. Everything's been easily accessible online. I've had stuff delivered. It's been really great. It's just been my partner and I, and we've got everything at home. Yeah, great. And I'm thinking,
I can't.
How the other half live? Lucky you.
It's crazy.
At least someone had a good time.
It's like you said about how people experience things in really, really different ways. The same experience can be completely different for two people.
Absolutely. And you never know what's going on in our heads, because that little voice that's talking to, like me right now, you can't hear that voice.
Yeah.
So what's your most favorite book or podcast or blog?
So one that I used to listen to a lot, I haven't for some time because of children, but I used to love one called This American Life, which is quite a long-standing podcast. I think it's been going for about 20 years, but it's just about stories of people based in America, and it's always tends to be on a theme. But I'm quite drawn to stories that are about real life. I'm not someone that's quite so much into non-fiction. I enjoy, that is non-fiction, but historical books, or it's about the experiences of people, and I think that's what I enjoy in terms of films and television programs as well. I watched a great film called A Marriage Story, I think last year, that was just about the breakdown of a marriage. And there's so much trauma and there's so much emotion in people's day-to-day lives, and this is just a way of experiencing that in a short chunk. And the journalist who does This American Life, he interviews the people who talk about their own experiences. It's from their own mouth, essentially, rather than it being reworked. So it's quite a simple idea, but a lovely podcast if people haven't listened to it.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of that one. So everything that Juliet's talking about, we are going to be making sure that there's a link included. So everyone will be able to link out to that. But no, I hadn't heard of that one. That sounds a really good one. I think the great thing about doing these interviews is I have discovered some incredible podcasts and books and different places to go and resources to go. So selfishly for me, it's been really
well, and actually there's one that's just been launched and I haven't had a chance to listen yet, but I'm very excited. So it's Grace Dent, who's the Guardian food writer, just interviewing people about the food that they eat, but the sort of the comfort food that they eat, because I think that does say a lot about people, doesn't it, what they eat in the privacy of their own home rather than in a posh restaurant. So that's next on my list.
She's been doing a few programs recently that have really humanized her a lot more, and you begin to see her more as a person. I think I watched her on Mastermind the other day, and she's really fascinating, and she just became a bit more human to me. And she's very funny.
The picture advertising the podcast is her in a bath of chips and gravy, so a woman after my own heart. It's very Yorkshire.
Love it. So if you could travel back in a time machine and tell your early career self anything, any piece of advice or just anything, what would it be?
It would just be to be more confident in your voice and what you have to say. Don't question your ability so much, and maybe take more risks. I think traditionally, and this is probably a generalization, but I think traditionally boys are kind of praised and told to speak out, and girls are often told it's more about pleasing people and not necessarily having a voice in quite the same way. And I think that translates professionally, in that you come into the workplace as a woman and you're not as confident, and you're nervous about saying the wrong thing or how you might be perceived. And I wish that I'd just cared about that a bit less, and and just said what I thought, because if it's the wrong thing, it doesn't matter. It's just a learning. And what I do now professionally is, regardless of whether I think a question is stupid, I ask it anyway. And I might caveat by saying, this might be a stupid question, but can you explain this more? But that comes with experience, and it comes with confidence, and you can't, you have to do something for a certain amount of time to gain that confidence, but just not to worry so much about saying the wrong thing, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really, really key, solid advice. The fact of asking questions, especially when you don't understand something, ask the question, and don't worry if you feel like you're going to be stupid, because I bet there's someone else there who wants to ask that question, who also didn't understand. And sometimes it's to do with people's delivery. And in their head, they'll be like, yeah, everyone understood this. But it's like, well, actually, no, I didn't. And like when I mentioned earlier about myself being dyslexic, if my dyslexia is playing havoc with me and I'm like, I didn't quite get that, do you know what? I'm just going to ask the question, because I want to walk away from this and get it, because I want that person to know that I'm going to get on and do it and understand what I'm doing. So,
and it shows that you're engaged as well. If you're asking a question, it means you're trying to get the information that you need. But it's hard. You can't force that. And I understand, as someone that's new to an industry and new to a job, it's not easy to put yourself out there and do that. But I think that's something that I really pride myself on doing now, just asking the stupid questions.
No, it's an absolutely brilliant piece of advice. And funnily enough, a lot of these interviews that we've done, I feel like most people have said that if they went back to talk to their early career self, it would be confidence.
Yeah.
Which says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
I'm slightly embarrassed about this one. So I get the Guardian Weekend, and they have the Weekend's magazine, and every week they have an interview with like a famous actor or sports person. And I think I read one a few years ago that was with a very, very established academic. It was someone like Jermaine Greer, and they asked a very, very similar question, and it's one that stuck with me and I've taken to. It is to moisturize your neck.
Oh really? Oh yes. Yes, as a woman, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is very sage advice. I think the other thing, and none of this is helpful professional advice, is to moisturize your neck. And always, if you're buying a dress, buy a dress with pockets. Not having pockets in your dress is an absolute nightmare. All dresses should be made with pockets. So they would be my two.
Unless you've got big hips like me, and then you're just accentuating those hips even more.
Where do you put all your things, in the summer, if you don't have a bag?
Oh, I don't know. I just have a bag.
So
in my hand. So yes, of course, it would be. Yeah, I do wear a lot of maxi dresses. I wear a lot of dresses without pockets, and it is annoying, but I just give them to my husband, to be honest.
Oh, well.
I shove things in his pockets and he's just like bulked out. And I'm like,
have a nice husband, he'll take you things for you. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that's probably not the most sage advice you've had on this podcast, but I still think it's sound.
I think it's very important advice, to be fair. Absolutely. So what's the number one tip that you would say for anyone that's working in marketing? Because obviously you work with marketers and have worked with marketers for years. So what do you think? And from being on your side of the industry, would you say is your number one tip?
So I think this relates to probably one of the previous discussion topics we've had earlier today, but I think it is about really holding on to your networks. I think what I found is, having been at the same company for quite a period of time, I've had lots of colleagues that have left or been made redundant. Yeah. And in the vast majority of cases, when they've gone on to take another job, it's been through the networks that they've developed in their previous roles. It's not been through the standard application process. Yeah. I remember there was an assistant publisher that worked at Emerald a long time ago who worked at Wimbledon before. And I said, how did you get a job working at Wimbledon? She said, nepotism. I think it is actually, your networks are as much as important as your skills, and so nurture those networks. And actually if you're ever leaving a job, make sure you think about the relationships that you have beyond your immediate roles, you know, people that you've just had good rapport with. Maybe certainly even it could be academics that work at different institutions, because you don't know when opportunities are going to arise. So I think that's relevant for any industry really, and that's something that I've tried to ensure I do more of actually over the past few years.
Absolutely. And like, you know, you can do a post on LinkedIn, for example, and say, hey, I'm looking for work and whatever, but people are only going to see that if they're looking at that moment, or if someone that they know likes it. So you'll probably find the majority of people aren't going to see that. And absolutely, the one of the times that I was made redundant, I reached out to my network and just said blah blah blah, and I picked up some maternity cover, and that, you know, set me up for building the business. And so that was hugely beneficial. And just don't be shy about it. It.
Absolutely, because you don't know if you don't ask, do you? And people aren't generally offended by these things, but it may be that they have an opportunity coming up and that they wouldn't have considered you for had you not approached them. So I think that's it's incredibly important, and important to develop your networks for the same reason.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing what gossip you get.
Exactly. So join committees.
Exactly. Go to conference dinners. Go to the pub, go to the bar.
The conference quiz at Alps.
Exactly. Be on the right table for that. That's my advice. It doesn't matter if you don't win, just be there with the right people. So what do you miss most since we've had the COVID-19 pandemic?
So it's two things really. The first is my sister. She lives in Newcastle, which is about 2 hours away, so not massively close, but I think before the pandemic we were quite close in age and we were seeing each other every 2 or 3 months. She also had a baby during the pandemic and I've only met him twice, so that's been quite hard, but we've started to be able to see each other a little bit more. And the second, and I was really surprised by this when I thought about it, but it's my commute. And I think we talked about this need for headspace. And I think what I didn't realise is it's a kind of a 20-minute commute. It's not very long, but my commute to work each day was just time for me, where I might not even put the radio on. I just have that peace to get myself set up for the day. And I've probably replaced that with the dog walks to a degree, but not having that time carved out for yourself, I think if you don't have it for whatever reason, you don't use it, or you know. So that 20 minutes either side of work each day, that's what I'm really looking forward to when I go back to the office.
It can completely resonate with me. That does. Absolutely. We don't often prioritize ourselves enough to give ourselves that headspace. And you know, even if it is just whacking on the radio and whacking the volume up, and you know, having the same type of music that you just love, and it sets you up for the day, and you're just like, you're like, woo, you know. I'm not going to sing because I'm horrendous at singing, like the glass will crack on the screen.
Podcast I might listen to on the way as well, you know, something just control over what it is that you're doing,
you're listening to. When someone changing the channel, or I want to listen to it, you're like, no. So anything that you want to ask me?
I was just interested in what the biggest professional risk that you have taken is, because I think partly because you because of the nature of the role that you have, and probably because maybe one of my regrets is I haven't taken as many risks as I would like in my professional career. So it's something that I would like to be more brave about.
Well, you certainly can do, because you know you're still young. There's plenty of risk that you can take.
I'm sure.
I think for me, it was going out on my own. So having been made redundant twice and been in redundancy 3 times, funny enough, to become a consultant, it was petrifying, and thinking, how am I going to get enough money in? How am I going to do this? Do I have the right network? Doubting myself, doubting my experience, doubting so many things, but saying, I've got to do this, I've got to try it, because I'm just a bit bored of being made redundant now. and I've got to try this and see if it works. And do you know what? If it doesn't matter. I'll just go and work for someone. That's fine. So growing the consultancy into a small company and then employing people at the beginning of last year, because then you become accountable for other people, not just your clients, but for making sure that your staff and your team have got, you know, wages and are looked after and all that kind of stuff. And you have to wear so many hats, and you really begin to appreciate the different roles in an organization. And even though I've always appreciated my colleagues, I now have a huge amount of respect for so many different roles, for HR, for IT, for admin, just, you know, all those different roles, and think, yeah, it's it's really tricky.
And logistically, I guess the time it takes to manage all of that as well when you've got
Yeah.
children as well.
My husband hates the fact that I work loads, and actually we've been recruiting a couple of team members, and I'm notoriously bad for working at night sometimes, because that's when I'm doing that's when I'm doing like my admin and invoicing and stuff. And so I sent someone an email on LinkedIn to say, you know, thanks so much for your application. We'd love you to complete our assessment. And I got a response back saying, quite frankly, I'm really surprised that you're sending me an email at 10:30 at night. And had you read my CV and my disclaimer, you'd know that I don't do unpaid assessments. And it was really quite cutting. And then he blocked me. And I was so taken aback, and I felt, as my husband said to me, well, you are sending him an email at, you know, or LinkedIn message at 10:30 at night. I'm like,
he doesn't have to respond to it though.
Oh, I know. And I'm like, we're the international bunch. I work with people all over the world in different time zones. So, you know, I was like, well, you know, clearly it wasn't the right fit for us. But to get, for one role, to get nearly 200 applications, and fortunately to have a question that qualified some people and didn't others, which was, can you work in the UK? That really helped to thin that down. But then to go through and individually send those people that weren't the right fit, who'd gone past that question, to send them an individual email to say, so sorry, you know, you haven't been successful at this time. You know, that was quite a thing, but I felt determined that it was important to do that, because it's quite soul destroying when you work, when you're when you're going and applying for roles and you get no response. And I felt it was really important to do that. So when he did that to me, and he'd been successful, I was just like, wow, that's, you know, that's really taking me aback. And we only checked the CVs to check the experience. I didn't go through and check people's hobbies and their disclaimers. Because we'd gone through, I don't know, 50, 100 applications, and that would have been a second interview thing. So for me, it really affected me. Don't be so stupid. It's like, well, you know, it does. But that wasn't the biggest professional risk. That was, you know, becoming a consultant. And then,
have you been able to start delegating more of the work now that you've got a team behind you?
Yeah, absolutely. And refine and find out what are the key roles that we need for our client base. We have over 60 freelancers now with specialist skill sets, which is fantastic. So they help us on various different projects. But also it has allowed me to say, what is it that I really want to do and that I really want to focus on? So I can focus on the more strategic side, the research, the white papers, stuff like that, because I love interviewing people. Whereas I've now got Megan, who used to work at, as I mentioned, used to work where you work, and she looks after the content side, and we're building up our team. So but I still have to do the admin and payroll and all that kind of stuff. So it keeps me grounded.
Worth the risk, obviously, though. I think that's what I think.
I wouldn't, someone would have to offer me a huge amount of money to go back to work client side, a huge amount of money, and then someone's going to have to run the international bunch.
And I guess the other thing I just wanted to ask, because I'm always interested, is what you're watching on streaming services right now.
So I like, oddly, anything zombie, Viking, crime drama related. So I had to write myself some little notes here, but occasionally, and I think it's because of this pandemic, I used to not like chick flicks and stuff like that, right? But then I had a child, and I loved horror movies and horror and I can't now. I find it really, especially if there's a child in there or animals, I get really distraught. I can't do it, but I still do love like the zombie stuff and things like that. So and the Nordic dramas, even though they're dubbed or they're, you know, they've got the love those. But Motherland I really like. I'm watching the Komsky Method at the moment with Michael Douglas.
Me too.
Yeah. And Schitt's Creek was hilarious. Love that. The Last Kingdom, because, you know, and Nightfall, I like a bit of that kind of stuff. Border Town was good. That's a Nordic one. but there are so many to mention, and I'm waiting for the next season of a lot of them as well. But I do have, and we mentioned car crash TV, I do have my guilty pleasures. My husband hates when I've got them on, so I watch them when I'm like doing admin-y stuff up here in the office late at night. So like Below Deck.
I watched Below Deck last night.
Made in Chelsea and Vanderpump Rules and just stuff like that. I've actually now, because the cast of The Only Way Is Essex has got so young, I can't. Oh
yeah, there is a tipping point, isn't there?
Yeah, and this season I've tipped over that point. So I'm now so anything like that, I'm just like, I get invested in those. My husband's like, this crap you're watching.
It's so funny with lockdown. That's the first conversation people go to, because everyone's just been locked in their house. And my husband joked to me the other week that he'd finished Netflix. It's because we've been at home for so long. So yeah, always interesting.
We do get to that point though, don't we, that we're scrolling through and we've got Amazon Prime, Now TV, Netflix, whatever else, and BT Vision, and you go through all these things and you're like, there's nothing on TV. No, there's nothing to watch. And you're like, I bet there really is, but yeah.
No, lose the will, don't you?
What was the most, I think, from the pandemic, the most eye-opening thing that I watched? Was it Tiger King? No.
Tiger King, yeah.
I mean, honestly, everyone was talking about it and it took me a few weeks to watch it, and I was like,
yeah, no, it was very strange.
Thank you, Netflix.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I have so enjoyed chatting to you.
Oh, me too.
It's brilliant. There's definitely loads more that we can have these different podcasts about and have chats about. There's things that you've said that I've been like, I can have a separate discussion with Juliet about this. I'm like, next conference, I'll be like, right, Juliet, let's go for dinner.
So hopefully enough work stuff and not just, there was some kind of personal stuff as well.
But always got to have that.
Yeah,
no, absolutely, really important. And I think it's really interesting to see how you started your career, how you've remained in the same organization, but how you've moved around, and also how you're inspiring and continuing to inspire your progression now with different types of education aspects that you're doing, and where potentially that's going to lead. And I think one of my key takeaways was how you're adapting yourself to continue to be very valuable for yourself as well as your organization, but also to have key skills that are sustainable for future roles.
Yeah, but and potentially to pivot into other industries if I needed to. I think because you have to think about what's next, don't you? You don't want to peak when you're in your late 30s. You want there to be life beyond that. So
till you retire.
But it is scary, isn't it? You going through that redundancy process, and it does take it out of you. And I think I'm really in awe of you going out on your own and building your own business. I think it's amazing, but
it's frightening, but it's it's been really worth it. And
sometimes it's the best thing to do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I love the most about it is the people that I've met that I would have never have met that are now clients and also friends. Wonderful, wonderful people. And the fact that I feel very privileged as well when I get involved in certain projects and I'm asked my opinion and I'm asked to help on certain things. The information that I absorb and the stuff that I'm learning from these organizations is incredible. And when I can pass that on to others that I'm working with, and I can continue that learning, and we can stop people making the same mistakes through lessons learned that others are doing, but be able to facilitate those conversations, because often everything's very closed and very confidential, but to do it in a way that you're not talking about anything that you shouldn't, but saying, have you thought about doing it like this instead, because that I've known that not to work in the past, for example, stuff like that. And when you see people just progressing, it's wonderful. We are so lucky in this industry. Don't you ever leave this industry. It's big enough to do so many different things. And like, when I talked about ProQuest earlier and Clarivate Analytics, that's like a whole other realm.
I know, it's so varied, isn't it? And the publishing industry is it's gone through change before. I think people thought the internet would be the end of publishing, and it obviously wasn't. So we'll continue to deal with the challenges and keep bouncing back, I would have thought.
Who knows where we're going to be in 10 years' time and what the industry is going to look like.
It's amazing pace of change, isn't it? Absolutely.
Incredible, absolutely incredible. And we're working such a technology driven environment that it has to be so fast paced for us. It's like we said earlier, it's really hard to keep up.
Yeah, it really
we get
but
there.
well, we do our best.
Amazing. Oh, Juliet, thank you so much
Oh,
for
no
taking
problem.
the time to talk to us today.